When diplomacy dies and hope fades, the emergency klaxon aboard the exploration vessel. Defiant Star cut through the morning shift like a blade through silk. Captain Elena Rivera bolted upright in her command chair, her dark eyes immediately focusing on the main display where a terrifying sight unfolded before them. The cosmic phenomenon known as the reality fracture was expanding faster than any computer model had predicted, its twisted energies tearing through space itself like a wound in the fabric of the universe. "Report," Elena commanded, her voice carrying the authority earned through 12 years of commanding deep space missions. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency around her, their blue and silver uniforms a stark contrast to the ominous red glow emanating from the phenomenon on screen. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, her second in command, turned from the sensor array with grim determination written across his weathered features. "Captain, the reality fracture has grown by 30% in the last 4 hours. It's now directly threatening the neutral zone between Krillian and ethereal territories. We're detecting massive energy signatures from both sides." Elena felt her stomach tighten. The neutral zone had been established 2 centuries ago after the devastating Krillian ethereal war nearly destroyed both civilizations. The Krillian Empire, with their aggressive expansion policies and superior military technology, had clashed repeatedly with the ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who protected ancient artifacts scattered throughout the galaxy. The war had ended not through victory, but through mutual exhaustion and the intervention of the Galactic Council. Dr. Marcus Chen approached from his station at the science console, his usually calm demeanor betrayed by the worry lines creasing his forehead. As the ship's chief xenobiologist and cultural specialist, he had spent years studying both civilizations. "Captain, if this phenomenon continues to grow, it will destabilize the quantum barriers maintaining the neutral zone. Both the Krillians and ethereals will interpret this as an attack on their sovereignty. The Krillians have already begun mobilizing their war fleets," reported Ensign Sarah Kim from the communications station. "I'm detecting 17 dreadnoughts moving toward the fracture zone, and their transmissions are becoming increasingly aggressive. They're claiming the ethereals are using the phenomenon as a weapon." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, processing the implications. The Krillians were a proud warrior race, standing nearly 8 feet tall with scales that shifted, color based on their emotional state. They had built their empire through conquest and viewed any unexplained phenomenon as a potential threat to be eliminated. The ethereals, in contrast, existed as beings of pure consciousness that could manipulate energy and matter at the quantum level. They communicated through harmonic resonance and considered the preservation of ancient knowledge their sacred duty. "What about the ethereals?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Multiple energy signatures consistent with their guardian vessels," Jake replied, studying the tactical display. "They're forming a defensive perimeter around several artifacts in the zone. Their harmonic frequencies are shifting to what our cultural database identifies as protective fury." The situation was escalating exactly as Elena had feared. Both civilizations were preparing for war, each convinced the other was responsible for the growing cosmic storm. The reality fracture continued to expand, its chaotic energies disrupting subspace communications and making long-range sensors unreliable. Worse, there were dozens of civilian settlements caught between the approaching fleets, colonies that had been established during the peaceful decades following the war. "Captain," came the voice of Communications Officer Chen Wei. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. It's Ambassador Vexitar." Elena straightened in her chair. Ambassador Vexitar was the Council's senior representative, a member of the ancient Praetorian species whose crystalline physiology allowed them to live for millennia. If the Council was calling directly, the situation had attracted attention at the highest levels of galactic government. "On screen," Elena ordered. The main display shifted to show the familiar interior of the Council chambers on Nexus Prime. Ambassador Vexitar stood at the center of the circular room, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's lighting into rainbow patterns. Behind him, representatives from hundreds of species filled the tiered seating, their alien forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. However, Elena noticed that many seats were empty, and those representatives who were present seemed agitated. Captain Rivera, Vextar began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. The Council has been monitoring the situation in the neutral zone. We are concerned about the potential for renewed conflict between the Krillian Empire and the Ethereal Collective. Elena leaned forward slightly. Ambassador, with respect, the situation is beyond concern. Both civilizations are mobilizing for war over a phenomenon that appears to be natural in origin. If we don't act quickly to mediate, we could see a resumption of hostilities that will make the previous war look like a minor skirmish. Vextar's crystalline features shifted, indicating what Elena had learned to recognize as diplomatic discomfort. Captain, the Council has deliberated extensively on this matter. The risks of intervention are significant. Both the Krillian Empire and the Ethereal Collective have explicitly warned against outside interference in what they consider their territorial integrity. Territorial integrity? Elena couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Ambassador, there are over 2 million civilians in the neutral zone, mixed settlements, research stations, trading posts. People who have lived there for generations are about to be caught in the crossfire of a war that could have been prevented. Behind Vextar, Elena could see other council members engaged in heated discussions. The Altarian representative, with their flowing robes and multiple limbs, was gesturing emphatically at a holographic display. The massive Corvanian delegate, easily twice the size of a human, was shaking his head in what appeared to be frustration. Even the usually serene Mystic Collective representative seemed agitated, their ethereal form flickering with unusual intensity. Captain Rivera, Vextar continued, the Council appreciates humanity's perspective on this matter. However, we must consider the broader implications. The Krillian Empire has made it clear that any interference will be considered an act of war. The Ethereal Collective has stated that outsiders cannot comprehend the sacred nature of their duty. The Council cannot risk triggering a galaxy-wide conflict. Elena felt her hands clench involuntarily. She had spent years working with various species throughout the galaxy, earning respect through careful diplomacy and genuine friendship. But she had also learned that many of the older civilizations were paralyzed by their own political calculations, unable to act when action required courage rather than consensus. So the Council's decision is to do nothing? She asked, her voice carefully controlled. The Council's decision, Vextar replied with what Elena recognized as finality, is to establish a quarantine zone around the affected area. No ships are to enter or leave the region until the situation resolves itself. This includes all human vessels, Captain Rivera. You are ordered to withdraw immediately to a safe distance. Elena looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. She saw the same mixture of anger and determination that she felt burning in her own chest. Dr. Chen was shaking his head in disbelief. Jake Morrison's jaw was set in the stubborn expression she knew meant he was ready to follow her lead, regardless of the consequences. Even young Ensign Kim was staring at the communication display with barely contained outrage. Ambassador, Elena said carefully, what happens to the civilian populations in the zone? The families, the children, the elderly who cannot evacuate quickly enough? Vextar's form shifted again, and Elena detected what might have been regret in his crystalline features. The Council acknowledges that some losses are inevitable. However, we cannot risk the stability of the entire galaxy for the sake of a few million individuals. The decision is final, Captain Rivera. Withdraw immediately or face sanctions. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Elena stared at the now empty screen, processing what she had just heard. The galactic community that humanity had worked so hard to join, the civilization that prided itself on advancement and cooperation, had just written off 2 million lives as acceptable losses to avoid political risk. Captain, Dr. Chen said, quietly, the nearest safe zone is 6 days away at maximum warp. Most of the civilian vessels in the neutral zone couldn't make that journey before the fleets arrive. Elena turned to her tactical officer, Commander Zara Thorne, who had been silently analyzing the situation. "Zara, what's our assessment of the human fleet in this sector?" Zara consulted her tactical display, her fingers dancing across the controls, with the precision of someone who had served in combat zones throughout the galaxy. "We have 17 vessels within response range, Captain. Nothing that could match a Krillian dreadnought or an ethereal guardian ship in direct combat, but our ships are fast and maneuverable. The cargo vessels could carry evacuees, and our science ships might be able to analyze the reality fracture phenomenon." Elena stood and walked to the main viewport, looking out at the stars that had been humanity's calling for generations. When humans had first achieved faster-than-light travel, they had been welcomed into the galactic community as curious explorers and innovative problem solvers. They had earned their place not through military might or ancient wisdom, but through their willingness to help others and their refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable. "Captain," Jake said quietly, moving to stand beside her, "Earth Command is going to want us to follow Council orders. We could face court-martial for disobeying a direct order from the Galactic Council." Elena nodded slowly. She understood the risks. Humanity was still the newest member of the galactic community, still proving their worth among species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. Defying the Council could result in humanity being expelled from the Galactic Alliance, losing access to trade routes, technology, and the diplomatic protections that had allowed human colonies to flourish throughout the galaxy. But as she looked out at the stars, Elena thought about the families huddled in civilian shelters, watching their governments prepare for war, while the galaxy's supposed protectors abandoned them to their fate. She thought about the children who would grow up without parents, the elderly who would die alone and afraid, and the countless dreams that would be extinguished because no one with power was willing to risk inconvenience to save them. Elena turned back to her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she felt burning in her own heart. These were people who had joined Starfleet not for glory or wealth, but because they believed in humanity's mission to explore, to help, and to stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. "Mr. Morrison," Elena said, her voice carrying the authority of absolute decision, "signal all human vessels in the sector. Tell them we're going to coordinate the evacuation of civilian populations from the neutral zone." Jake's face split into a grin that would have done his Irish ancestors proud. "And if they ask about Council orders?" Elena smiled back, feeling the familiar rush of certainty that came with making the right choice regardless of the consequences. "Tell them that humanity has never been very good at following orders when innocent lives are at stake. We're going to show the galaxy what happens when you abandon hope." As the defiant star changed course toward the expanding reality fracture, Elena felt the weight of history settling around her shoulders. The galaxy had made its choice, choosing political safety over moral courage. Now it was humanity's turn to choose, and their answer would echo across the stars for generations to come. Humanity's answer to galactic cowardice. The coordination center aboard the Defiant Star had been transformed into something that would have impressed the admirals of major civilizations. What had once been a simple conference room now buzzed with activity, as holographic displays showed the positions of 17 human vessels converging on the neutral zone. Captain Elena Rivera stood at the center of it all, coordinating the most audacious rescue operation in human history. "Captain, the cargo vessel New Dawn reports successful evacuation of Research Station Epsilon," announced Communications Officer Chen Wei. "That's 347 civilians, including 68 children now safely aboard. However, Commander Walsh reports that the station's fusion reactor is showing signs of instability due to the reality fracture's expanding field." Elena nodded grimly. The phenomenon was growing faster than their most pessimistic projections had predicted. What had started as a relatively small distortion in spacetime had expanded into a cosmic maelstrom that was affecting everything within a 50-light-year radius. Worse, the chaotic energies were interfering with both Krillian and ethereal technologies, making both civilizations even more suspicious of each other's intentions. Dr. Marcus Chen approached from his mobile laboratory setup, his normally neat appearance disheveled from hours of intensive analysis. "Captain, I've been studying the energy patterns from the reality fracture. Something isn't right about this phenomenon." The quantum signatures are too regular, too structured for a natural occurrence. Elena turned to face him fully. What are you suggesting, Marcus? I'm suggesting this isn't a natural phenomenon at all, Dr. Chen replied, pulling up a three-dimensional holographic model of the fracture's energy patterns. Look at these resonance frequencies. They're artificially generated, and they're specifically designed to interfere with both Krillian military technology and ethereal energy manipulation abilities. Commander Zara Thorne looked up from her tactical display, her expression thoughtful. If someone wanted to start a war between the Krillians and ethereals, disrupting their defensive capabilities while making each side think the other was responsible would be an effective strategy. Before Elena could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began blaring. Jake Morrison turned from his station with urgency written across his face. Captain, we have incoming vessels. 3 Krillian interceptors, approaching fast and weapons hot. Elena moved quickly to the command center, her mind racing through possibilities. Hail them, Jake. Let's see if we can avoid a fight. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Krillian warship. The captain was an imposing figure even. By Krillian standards, his scales a deep red that indicated high emotional arousal. His name appeared on the screen as Commander Thraktar, and his reputation as a fierce warrior was well known throughout the galaxy. Human vessel, Thraktar's voice rumbled through the translation matrix. You have entered Krillian territorial space during a military operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Elena stepped forward, her posture respectful but determined. Commander Thraktar, I am Captain Elena Rivera of the human vessel Defiant Star. We are conducting humanitarian evacuations of civilian populations caught in the expansion zone of the reality fracture. We have no military objectives and pose no threat to Krillian interests. Thraktar's scales shifted to a deeper red, indicating increased aggression. Lies. You humans work with the ethereal collective. This evacuation is cover for your true mission to steal sacred artifacts from the neutral zone. Elena felt her heart sink. The Krillians' paranoia was making diplomatic resolution nearly impossible. Commander, I give you my word as a Starfleet officer that we are only evacuating civilians. I invite you to scan our cargo bays and verify that we carry only refugees and basic supplies. Your word? Thraktar's laugh was a harsh sound that the translators struggled to render. Humans have been members of the galactic community for barely a century. What value does the word of such a young species hold? Elena felt anger flash through her, but she kept her voice steady. Commander, regardless of how long humans have been in space, we have never broken our word when given in good faith. If you will not accept our peaceful intentions, then perhaps you would accept our assistance in your conflict with the ethereals. Thraktar's scales shifted to a pattern Elena didn't recognize, indicating surprise. You would offer to fight alongside Krillian forces? I would offer to help you discover the truth about what's really happening here, Elena replied. My science officer has evidence that the reality fracture is not a natural phenomenon. Someone is manipulating both your people and the ethereals into a conflict that serves neither of your interests. Before Thraktar could respond, new alarms began sounding on both bridges. Ensign Kim's voice carried a note of panic. Captain, massive energy spike detected. 3 ethereal Guardian vessels are approaching on an intercept course. The space around them suddenly filled with light as the ethereal ships materialized, their crystalline hulls refracting the light of nearby stars into brilliant displays. The ethereals communicated through harmonic frequencies, and the translation computers aboard the Defiant Star struggled to convert their musical language into words. Krillian aggressor vessels, the translated voice carried an otherworldly quality that made Elena's skin tingle. You have violated the sacred neutral zone and threatened protected artifacts. Withdraw immediately or face the Guardian's wrath. Thraktar's scales turned almost black with rage. Ethereal manipulators, you have created this space storm to weaken our defenses and claim our territory. We will not be driven from space that is rightfully ours. Elena realized that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Both sides were convinced the other was responsible for the reality fracture, and the presence of human ships was only adding to the confusion. She made a decision that went against every diplomatic protocol she had ever learned. "All vessels, this is Captain Rivera," she broadcast on all frequencies. "I am sharing our sensor data with both Krillian and ethereal ships. Our analysis shows that the reality fracture is artificially generated by an unknown third party. We have evidence that suggests both of your civilizations are being manipulated into a conflict that benefits neither of you." The space around them fell silent except for the background hum of various ship systems. Elena held her breath, knowing that she had just committed herself and her crew to a course of action that could result in their ship being destroyed by either side. Commander Thraktar was the first to speak. "Human Captain, you claim to have evidence of this manipulation. What proof do you offer?" Elena nodded to Dr. Chen, who began transmitting their data. "The quantum signatures of the reality fracture show artificial modulation patterns. Someone has built a device capable of generating localized space-time distortions, and they're using it to create a crisis that will drive your civilizations to war." The ethereal response came as a complex harmonic pattern that the translators rendered as the humans speak of quantum manipulations. "We sense disturbances in the cosmic harmony that are not natural. Yet how do we know this is not deception designed to aid Krillian expansion?" Elena looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had carried humanity through countless challenges. "Because we're willing to prove it. Commander Thraktar, Guardian Vessel, we propose a temporary ceasefire to investigate the source of the reality fracture. If we can find and shut down the device creating this phenomenon, we can prove that neither of your civilizations is responsible." The silence stretched for long moments. Helena could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. She was asking two civilizations that had been enemies for centuries to trust not only each other but also a species that most of the galaxy still considered newcomers. "What do you propose, human?" Thraktar asked finally. Elena straightened, feeling the familiar surge of determination that had carried her through the most difficult moments of her career. "We propose a joint investigation. Krillian ships, ethereal guardians, and human vessels working together to find the source of the reality fracture and shut it down. If we're right, we'll have proof that you're both victims of manipulation. If we're wrong, you can settle your differences after we've saved the 2 million civilians currently trapped in the zone." The ethereal response came more quickly. "This Termisser, the humans speak of cooperation between ancient enemies. This is unprecedented. Yet the cosmic harmonies grow more discordant with each passing moment. Perhaps cooperation serves the greater harmony." Commander Thraktar's scales shifted through several patterns before settling on a deep orange that Elena's cultural database identified as wary acceptance. "Very well, human captain. Krillian forces will participate in this investigation. But know that if this proves to be deception, your species will face the full might of the Empire." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Understood, Commander. And Commander, Guardian Vessel, while we're investigating, my people will continue evacuating civilians from the danger zone. We won't let innocent people die while we're searching for answers." As the three fleets began forming an unprecedented alliance, Elena couldn't help but smile. The Galactic Council had chosen to abandon hope, writing off millions of lives as acceptable losses. But humanity had chosen differently. They had chosen to believe that no problem was unsolvable, that no life was expendable, and that sometimes the right choice was to stand up and fight even when the odds seemed impossible. The reality fracture continued to expand, and somewhere in the cosmic storm, an unknown enemy was watching their plans unfold. But for the first time in centuries, Krillian and ethereal ships were working together instead of against each other, and at the center of it all was a small human fleet that had refused to accept that some things were beyond hope. The galaxy had abandoned them, but humanity was just getting started.